Some days, the silence on the farm felt like it could swallow me whole. It wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet people imagine when they think of countryside life. No, this was the heavy, lingering kind. The kind that makes you feel like you're the only person left in the world. I used to love the stillness out here, the gentle sounds of the wind through the trees, the distant hum of the creek. When Ryan and I first moved to this place, I thought it was everything I ever wanted. A chance to slow down, to build something real together, away from the noise of the city. But life doesn't always stay how you pictured it, does it? At first, it was perfect. We were fresh out of college, young, wide-eyed, and ready to take on the world. Ryan talked about dreams of growing something lasting, something we could pass down. I believed him. We spent late nights talking under the stars, laughing about how clueless we were about running a farm, but loving every moment of it. But slowly, almost without noticing, the dynamic shifted. Ryan's ambitions grew, and so did the demands on his time. He threw himself into the work, managing deals, expanding the land, making connections with suppliers. And I stayed behind, tending to the house, the animals, and everything in between. It wasn't that Ryan stopped caring. He still asked how my day was, still smiled when he came through the door. But over time, those smiles felt thinner, the conversations shorter. Work always lingered just behind his eyes, and even when he was physically here, it felt like his mind was 100 miles away. I started to realize how many dinners we had eaten in silence, how many evenings passed without more than a quick good night. I'd try to brush it off, tell myself that was just how life was. After all, he was working hard for us, for our future. But no matter how much I told myself that, the feeling crept in like a draft through the cracks. That ache of sitting across the table from someone who feels like a stranger. That strange ache of missing someone who's right in front of you. I stopped noticing when I began filling my days with chores just to keep my mind busy. Feed the chickens, clean the stables, fix whatever little thing had broken. It was easier to focus on tasks than to face how empty things felt inside. And the worst part was, I couldn't really talk about it. How do you explain to someone who's working day and night that the thing you miss most isn't the farm or the lifestyle, but them? I didn't want to seem ungrateful. I didn't want to burden Ryan with one more thing, so I kept quiet. I smiled when he came home late. I listened when he talked about contracts and crops and numbers. I nodded, even when all I wanted to do was scream that none of it mattered if it meant we barely spoke about anything real anymore. And little by little, that quiet between us became something I carried around like a weight. I'd walk the fields alone, stand by the fence staring out at the horizon, and wonder how something so wide open could feel so suffocating. There were times when I told myself maybe this was normal, that maybe this was just what marriage looked like after a few years. But deep down, I knew better. It wasn't supposed to feel like living parallel lives. It wasn't supposed to feel like no one could hear me. Every day, I'd put on the same routine, keep things in order, smile when needed, and keep the deeper thoughts tucked away like old letters in a drawer. But inside, it felt like I was fading, becoming a version of myself I didn't recognize. The kind of person who stopped asking for more because it seemed easier not to expect it. I don't know exactly when I realized how lonely I'd become. Maybe it was one evening, sitting on the porch watching the sun sink behind the hills, realizing Ryan wasn't coming home until late again. Or maybe it was one of those nights when I rolled over in bed, feeling the cold space beside me, knowing he'd fallen asleep at his desk. But the hardest part wasn't the solitude. It was the fact that even when we were together, there was a distance neither of us seemed able to cross. It was like there was a wall between us, built brick by brick over time, and neither of us knew how to tear it down. I kept telling myself that tomorrow would be the day I'd say something. Tomorrow I'd speak up, tell him how I really felt. But tomorrow always seemed to slip away, buried under all the little distractions and tasks. It's funny how easily you can lose yourself when you spend every day trying not to rock the boat. Looking back now, I realize it wasn't the farm or the work that made me feel this way. It was the slow, creeping realization that somewhere along the line, we stopped showing up for each other, and once that space opens up, it becomes harder and harder to bridge it. But here's the thing about loneliness. It has a way of sneaking up on you, making itself at home before you even notice. And by the time you do, you're left standing in the middle of your life, wondering how it all became so quiet. There's something about animals that people underestimate. Most think they're just there, part of the scenery, something to take care of or admire from a distance. But anyone who's ever really spent time with one knows the truth. They feel things. They sense things in ways we can't always put into words. That's what Orion became for me. Not just a horse, not just another responsibility on the farm, but this quiet, steady presence that somehow understood me better than most people did. Ryan bought Orion a couple of years ago. It wasn't anything special at the time. We had some extra money, and Ryan thought having a horse would be a nice addition to the place, said it might even give me something to do, a hobby of sorts. I remember when Orion first arrived, this tall, chestnut-colored beauty with sharp, intelligent eyes. There was something different about him, even back then. He stood calmly, not skittish like some horses can be when they're adjusting to new surroundings. It was like he belonged from the start. I didn't think much of it at first. He was just another part of the daily routine. Feed him, groom him, make sure the stable stayed clean. But slowly, almost without realizing, he started becoming more than that. The days on the farm could stretch endlessly, especially when Ryan was away, which felt like most of the time. And it was during those long, quiet afternoons that I'd find myself wandering down to the barn without really meaning to. I'd walk in, and there he'd be. Orion standing there, head tilted slightly, his ears twitching as if he was waiting for me. I didn't have to talk. I didn't have to explain anything. Just being near him felt like enough. There's something about brushing a horse's coat, the repetitive motion, the way they stand still and patient, that makes it easy to let your mind wander. It's almost like they absorb all the noise in your head without judgment. I'd spend hours out there sometimes, running my hands through his mane, listening to the steady sound of his breathing. I found myself talking to him more and more. Nothing dramatic, nothing heavy, just little things at first. How the weather had been, what needed fixing around the house, funny memories from when Ryan and I first moved here. But as time went on, those small conversations shifted. I started sharing things I couldn't say out loud to anyone else. Things like how lonely the house felt at night, how the walls seemed to echo with silence, how sometimes I felt invisible in my own life, like I'd slipped into a version of myself I barely recognized. Orion never answered, of course, but in those moments it felt like he heard everything. He'd stand still, flick his ears, sometimes nudge me gently with his nose as if to say, "I'm here." And maybe that was all I needed, just to feel like someone, or something, noticed. It's strange, the way you can build a bond without even realizing it's happening. One day you wake up, and that horse isn't just another part of the farm. He's become a part of your day you can't imagine missing. There were days when I'd sit on the edge of the stall, my back against the wooden wall, and Orion would shuffle over, lower his head, until it rested close enough that I could feel his breath. I used to joke to myself that he was better company than most people. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer advice, didn't tell me everything would be fine. He just listened. And sometimes That's all a person needs. I think what made it easier with Orion was that he never expected anything from me. With Ryan, there were always these unspoken expectations: be supportive, be understanding, keep the house running smoothly. None of them unreasonable, but all of them adding up over time until I felt like I was carrying the weight of it all. But out there in the barn with Orion, none of that mattered. I could just be. No roles, no pressure, no pretending. I'd catch myself sometimes, lingering longer than I meant to, letting the minutes slip by as if I didn't have a house full of unfinished chores waiting for me. But those moments became the best part of my days. There was something grounding about his quiet strength, the way he stood tall and unbothered by the chaos outside the barn doors. It felt like a reminder that not everything had to be so complicated. Looking back now, I think part of me was searching for something to hold on to, something steady. Orion gave me that, even if he didn't know it. He became my anchor in a life that felt like it was drifting farther and farther from shore. Every time I walked into that barn, I felt a little more like myself, like there was still a piece of me left beneath all the layers I'd built up over the years. It's hard to explain to anyone who hasn't been there how a bond like that can grow, how much comfort you can find in something so simple. But it was real as anything else in my life at the time. And as the days stretched on, and the distance between Ryan and me grew wider, Orion remained constant, a quiet witness to everything I couldn't bring myself to say. Sometimes I wonder if Ryan ever noticed how much time I spent out there. If he realized how often I chose the barn over the house, Orion's steady presence over the cold emptiness of our dining table. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. But it didn't change the fact that those quiet moments became my escape, my way of coping with the life I found myself living. And the longer it went on, the more I realized how much I needed those moments, how much I relied on that silent understanding. It wasn't about the horse, not really. It was about having something, someone, that didn't make me feel invisible. Something that made me feel seen, even when no one else seemed to notice. I guess I should have known that someone would notice. You can only keep things bottled up for so long before they start spilling over, even in ways you don't mean. And for me, it was Ella who noticed first. She wasn't the type to miss much, quiet, sharp, always watching but never saying more than necessary. I think that's part of what made her words cut so deep when she finally spoke up. She didn't offer small talk or polite chit-chat like most people. No. She waited, took everything in, and when she finally opened her mouth, it was because she had something worth saying. Ella had been working with us for a few months, brought on to help train Orion. Ryan had met her through a friend, said she came highly recommended, knew her way around horses better than most. And that much was true. She handled Orion like she'd known him his whole life, calm and efficient, never rattled. But what Ryan didn't realize, or maybe didn't care to notice, was that Ella saw more than just the horses she worked with. She had a way of reading people too, like she could peel back whatever mask you were wearing without much effort. At first, she didn't say much to me beyond the usual, just polite exchanges when our paths crossed in the barn. I think she figured out early on that I wasn't the type to open up easily, but she paid attention. I could feel her eyes on me sometimes when she thought I wasn't looking. Watching the way I lingered too long by Orion's stall, the way I talked softly to him when no one else was around. She never interrupted, never pushed, but I knew she saw. One afternoon, it was just the two of us. Ryan had left for yet another trip, something to do with expanding the farm's operations. The house felt emptier than usual, and I found myself walking down to the barn without much thought. Orion was there, of course, calm as ever. I was brushing him down, the steady rhythm of it soothing me like it always did. Ella appeared in the doorway, leaning casually against the frame, her arms crossed but her gaze steady. She didn't speak right away, just stood there, watching. It made me a little uneasy, but I kept my focus on Orion, pretending not to notice. After a while, she finally broke the silence. "You spend a lot of time out here," she said, her voice quiet, but carrying enough weight to make me pause. I glanced up, giving her a faint smile. "It's peaceful," I replied, hoping that would be enough. But Ella wasn't one to let things slide. She walked a few steps closer, her boots crunching softly against the dirt floor. "It's more than that," she said, her tone matter of fact. "You're not just here for the peace and quiet." I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. Just kept brushing Orion, my hands moving automatically, my heart starting to thud a little faster. She didn't push, didn't demand an answer. Instead, she stood there for another long moment, and then she said something I'll never forget. "Horses can sense things people won't admit," she murmured, her eyes meeting mine. "Loneliness, mostly. That's what draws them to us. They know when we're carrying something heavy." The words hit me like a punch. I felt my throat tighten, my chest constricting as I swallowed hard. I wanted to laugh it off, make some joke, pretend I didn't know exactly what she meant. But there was no use. She had seen through me, clear as day. I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. Instead, I focused on Orion, letting the silence settle between us like thick air. Ella no parecía molesta por la falta de respuesta. She just gave a small nod, as if she'd said what she needed to say, and turned to leave. After she walked away, I stood there, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath me. It wasn't that Ella had told me anything I didn't already know. I'd been carrying that weight for a long time. But hearing it said out loud, having someone else see it, it forced me to face something I'd been trying to ignore. It made me realize that no matter how much I thought I could hide, there were cracks showing through. From that day on, things felt different between us. She didn't bring it up again, but I could feel her quiet understanding every time we crossed paths. She didn't need me to explain. She'd seen enough. And in some strange way, that made me feel less alone. Like there was at least one person in the world who understood the storm swirling inside me without needing it spelled out. I started paying attention to her more too. Noticed the way she carried herself, always composed, but with this underlying sadness in her eyes. It made me wonder what she was carrying, what weight she bore, that taught her how to recognize it in others. We never talked about it, but there was an unspoken agreement between us, a recognition, a shared silence that felt like its own kind of connection. Looking back, I realize now how much that moment mattered. Ella no hizo nada, no ofreció soluciones, ni trató de hablarme de lo que estaba sintiendo. She simply saw me, really saw me. And sometimes, that's the most powerful thing someone can do. Just stand there, quietly, and remind you that you're not as invisible as you think you are. It's strange how you always think you'll have time to prepare, time to get your thoughts straight, time to find the right words. But life doesn't really work like that, does it? Moments sneak up on you, catching you off guard when you least expect them. That's exactly how it happened to me. The night that everything I'd been avoiding finally caught up, and there was nowhere left to hide. It started like so many others. Ryan was supposed to be out of town, wrapped up in some business trip that felt like a never-ending series of meetings and late-night calls. I hadn't expected him back until the weekend. So, like usual, I found myself wandering out to the barn after dinner. The house had felt colder than usual, emptier. The clock ticked too loudly, the silence pressing down on me until I couldn't stand it anymore. Orion was waiting for me, like he always was. I slipped inside, closing the door behind me and breathing in the familiar scent of hay, leather, and the quiet warmth that always seemed to linger there. It felt like the only place I could breathe. I went through the motions, brushing him down, whispering soft little things under my breath. I told myself I was just checking on him, but deep down, I knew better. The barn had become my escape, Orion, my safe place. I don't even remember how long I was standing there, running my fingers through his mane, leaning against his side like he was the only thing keeping me grounded. The night felt still, heavy, almost peaceful, until the sharp crunch of gravel outside made my heart jump. At first, I didn't think much of it. Probably just the wind, I told myself. But then I heard the distinct sound of a car door closing. My pulse quickened, and for one split second, I froze, not wanting to believe what I already knew. Footsteps followed, familiar ones. The door creaked open behind me, and when I turned, there he was. Ryan. He stood in the doorway, the light from outside casting a long shadow behind him. For a moment, neither of us said anything. I couldn't even breathe. His eyes flicked from me to Orion, then back to me, and I saw something shift in his face. Confusion, suspicion, maybe something else I couldn't name. "Claire," he said, his voice low, controlled. "What are you doing out here?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. How could I explain it? How could I make him understand without sounding like a fool? I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of all the words I'd left unsaid, sitting like a stone in my chest. "Just checking on Orion," I managed, though even I didn't believe it. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he stepped further inside, closing the distance between us. The silence between us was thick, stretched too tight. "I didn't hear you come home," I added quickly, hoping to fill the space, but it only made everything worse. Ryan crossed his arms, his gaze fixed on me like he was trying to read something written across my face. "I came back early," he said. "Thought I'd surprise you." He didn't smile when he said it. There was no warmth in his voice, just something sharp, something heavy hanging between us. My stomach turned. I couldn't meet his eyes, so I focused on Orion instead, resting my hand on his side like it was some kind of anchor. "I couldn't sleep," I said softly, trying to sound casual. The house felt quiet. Ryan's jaw tensed. He glanced around the barn, then back at me. "You've been spending a lot of time out here," he said, his voice deceptively calm but carrying something underneath. A question, a challenge. I didn't know how to answer. The truth felt too big, too messy to fit into a neat little sentence. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, my fingers tightening slightly against Orion's mane. "It's peaceful," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. But Ryan wasn't letting it go. "Claire, what's going on?" His tone sharpened, cutting through the quiet like a blade. "You've been different, distant, and now I come home to find you out here, in the middle of the night, like you'd rather be anywhere but with me." The words hit harder than I expected, slicing through all the walls I'd built up. I wanted to deny it, wanted to tell him he was imagining things, but the look on his face told me he already knew. He just wanted me to admit it. My throat felt tight, my chest burning with the weight of everything I hadn't said. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the frustration, the confusion, the hurt flickering behind his eyes. And suddenly, all the excuses felt hollow. I took a deep breath, feeling like I was about to step off a cliff. "I've felt alone, Ryan," I said quietly, my voice shaking. "For a long time now." The words hung there, raw and heavy. He stared at me, his expression unreadable. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked after a moment, his voice softer, but still laced with something sharp. I shook my head, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. Every time I tried, you were too busy, too tired. I stopped trying. My voice cracked. I didn't want to be another thing on your list. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling loudly. Claire, I was working for us. I thought I was doing the right thing. I know, I whispered. But somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling like it was about us. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. The barn felt too small, the air too thick. I could see the realization sinking into Ryan's face, the weight of everything we'd let build up between us. And Orion? He finally asked, his eyes flicking to the horse standing quietly beside me. Is that why you've been out here? I swallowed hard, feeling the lump rise in my throat. He's just been there when I needed something steady, someone to listen. I knew how it sounded. Ridiculous, maybe, but it was the truth. Ryan looked away, his jaw tightening again, and I saw the hurt flash across his face before he could hide it. I didn't know it had gotten this bad, he said quietly. Neither did I replied, my voice barely audible, until it was. The silence stretched again, but something had shifted. The things we'd both ignored, avoided, had finally been dragged into the light. There was no more pretending. Ryan nodded slowly, his shoulders tense. I don't know how we fix this, he admitted, his voice rough, but I want to try. I blinked, surprised by the sudden swell of emotion in my chest. I nodded, feeling my throat tighten again. Me too, I whispered. The confrontation wasn't loud. There were no shouting matches, no slammed doors, just two people standing face to face, finally acknowledging the cracks that had been spreading for far too long. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start piecing things back together. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at Ryan, with all the words caught in my throat. It felt like years' worth of silence, of pretending, of brushing things under the rug had all gathered into this one moment, pressing heavy on my chest. My heart was pounding, and for the first time in so long, I realized I couldn't keep hiding behind polite smiles and surface conversations anymore. I had to say it. The truth wasn't something dramatic or scandalous. It was quieter, sadder, something that had been eroding me slowly over time. I took a shaky breath, feeling the weight of his gaze waiting, almost bracing. Ryan, I started, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. I felt so lost. The words came out brittle, but real. His expression didn't shift much, but I could see something flicker behind his eyes. Maybe confusion, maybe something else. But I kept going. I didn't notice it at first, I said, my hands fidgeting nervously. We were both busy. You had the business, the meetings, the trips, and I thought I was fine. I kept telling myself I was fine. My voice cracked a little, and I looked away, focusing on the floor, the dust. Anything to avoid the intensity of the moment. But somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like me, like the person I used to be. It felt strange saying it out loud, like I was confessing something shameful, but at the same time, I couldn't keep carrying it. I thought if I kept going, kept being the supportive wife, kept smiling, eventually things would click back into place. But they never did. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to keep speaking. The truth is, I've been lonely for a long time. I've missed you, but I've also missed myself. I didn't know how to ask for more without feeling like I was being ungrateful or selfish. Ryan was still quiet, listening. There was something in his face, something unreadable, but he wasn't stopping me. That gave me the courage to say the hardest part. I spent so much time trying to fill that emptiness with anything I could: work, routines, even just coming out here to the barn, finding comfort in the quiet. But all it did was mask the fact that I felt invisible, like I was disappearing bit by bit. My hands clenched at my sides. I never wanted to hurt you. This was never about blame. But I can't ignore how disconnected I've become, not just from you, but from myself. My voice grew steadier, even as my heart felt raw. I don't have all the answers. I don't know exactly how to fix things, or even if we can. But I know I need to be honest about how I've been feeling. Because pretending everything's fine hasn't worked. And I can't keep living like that. Finally, I looked up, meeting his eyes fully for the first time since the words started pouring out. That's all I can offer right now. My truth. I've felt alone. And I don't want to be anymore. Not in my own life. For a moment, the silence between us stretched thick, but somehow it felt different. It wasn't the uncomfortable quiet of avoidance or distance. It was a pause, one where something had shifted. I had finally said what I had needed to say for years. No more hiding. I don't think I ever really understood what it meant to choose myself until that morning. I had always put other people first, especially Ryan. Our life together had started with so much hope, so many dreams. And for a while, I truly believed that we were building something strong, something lasting. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of myself. I was so focused on being the person I thought I was supposed to be, the supportive wife, the one who held everything together while he chased his goals, that I didn't notice how I was slowly fading into the background. My needs, my voice, my happiness, they all took a backseat. I kept telling myself it was fine, that this was just part of life, part of growing up, part of being married. But it wasn't fine. I just didn't want to admit it. That morning, the light was just starting to creep over the fields outside, soft and golden. The kind of light that makes everything look almost magical, even if your heart is heavy. I stood by the window, holding a cup of coffee I'd forgotten to drink, staring out at the pasture where Orion grazed quietly. He looked peaceful, content. And for some reason, that peacefulness brought tears to my eyes. Not out of sadness exactly, but something deeper, a kind of longing. I wanted to feel that peace. I wanted to wake up and not feel weighed down by doubt and regret and all the unspoken things between Ryan and me. I wanted to feel alive again, not like I was just going through the motions. The truth was, we had drifted apart a long time ago. It hadn't happened all at once. It was slow, gradual. Little moments that slipped away, conversations that never happened, feelings pushed aside for the sake of avoiding conflict. I'd convinced myself that this was just a phase, that we'd find our way back to each other. But instead, the distance kept growing, and I kept shrinking. And in the silence between us, I had forgotten who I was. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know exactly what the future would look like or how things would unfold. But what I did know, what I felt deep in my gut, was that I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep waiting for someone else to make me feel whole or seen or valued. I had to stop waiting for life to happen to me. I had to take a step, even a small one, towards something different, something honest, something mine. I turned from the window, picked up my old camera from the table, and just held it in my hands for a while. It felt heavier than I remembered, but in a good way, like it was full of possibility. This camera had once been my way of seeing the world, of capturing moments that mattered, of expressing who I was. I had let it sit on the shelf for too long, gathering dust, much like my own sense of purpose. Holding it again reminded me that I used to dream, that I used to create, that I used to feel inspired, and maybe I still could. I didn't make any big proclamations that day. I didn't storm out or deliver some dramatic speech. But I did make a choice. I chose to start listening to myself again, to stop ignoring the voice inside me that had been whispering for so long that something needed to change. I didn't know if that meant Ryan and I would part ways or find a new way forward together. But I did know that I had to stop hiding behind fear and start living with intention. So I walked outside, the morning air cool against my skin, and I lifted the camera to my eye. I looked through the lens at Orion standing in the field, the sun casting a soft glow across his back, and I took a picture. That click of the shutter felt like a beginning, a small, quiet declaration that I was still here, that I still mattered, that my story wasn't over. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Not the kind that depends on someone else or on things going perfectly. Just the simple hope that comes from knowing you're finally choosing yourself and that whatever comes next, you're ready to face it with open eyes and an open heart.